There is a specific feeling that doesn't have an easy name. Not depression, that's too heavy, too clinical for what this actually is. Not introversion, not sadness, not social anxiety. Something quieter and more precise than all of those. It's the feeling of wanting to simply stop being reachable. Not dramatically, not forever, just for a while. To exist somewhere outside the expectations. Somewhere no one needs a response from you. Somewhere you don't have to explain yourself, perform interest, or arrive emotionally prepared for another person's needs. Most people who feel this way quietly assume something is wrong with them. What almost none of them consider is that the feeling itself might be one of the most intelligent signals their mind has ever sent. The urge to disappear from social life, from the texts, the plans, the presence, tends to arrive not at random, but at very specific points. After long stretches of being deeply available to others. After periods of nodding when you meant to say no. After conversations where you left knowing you had said the right things but felt nothing had actually been said at all. It follows the stretches of life where you have been, functionally, everywhere except inside yourself. And if you look carefully at the pattern, you will notice that the urge is less about escaping people, and more about escaping a version of yourself that only exists when people are watching. This is what most explanations of social withdrawal miss entirely. They diagnose it as fear, avoidance, or emotional dysregulation, something to be corrected and managed back into social compliance. What they rarely acknowledge is that the urge carries information. It is not noise. It is signal. And when a person suppresses it long enough, what they lose is not just energy or time, they lose the capacity to distinguish what they actually want from what they have simply been performing for so long that it began to feel like preference. You are not exhausted by people. You are exhausted by the version of yourself you are required to be around them. Consider how much of social life is performance, not in the cynical sense, but in the most ordinary, invisible sense. You adjust your tone. You hold back the thing you actually think. You manage the emotional temperature of the room without being asked. You arrive at conversations already calculating what the other person needs from you before they have said a word. Over time, this does not simply tire you. It creates a specific kind of depletion that rest alone cannot repair, because it is not your body that is tired. It is the self that keeps having to shrink itself into socially acceptable shapes. And the urge to disappear is what happens when that self has been shrunk for too long. Here is where the picture inverts completely. What you have been calling the desire to escape from other people is more honestly described as the desire to stop escaping from yourself. The withdrawal is not antisocial. It is an act of reorientation, a turning back towards something that has been slowly evacuated across every social interaction, every managed response, every moment where you chose accommodation over authenticity. The direction you are trying to move toward, when the urge arrives, is not away from people. It is toward a version of yourself that exists independently of their presence. One that does not need their attention to feel coherent. The urge to vanish is not weakness. It is one of the most honest signals a person can receive from themselves. There is a layer beneath this that cuts even deeper. The reason the urge carries guilt alongside it, the reason most people feel they must suppress it, apologize for it, or treat it as evidence of some deficiency in their character, is that modern social life has quietly redefined constant availability as the primary expression of care. To be reachable is to love. To disappear, even briefly and privately, reads as coldness. And so the person who most desperately needs to return to themselves is the one who will feel the most guilt for attempting it, because they are often the person who has spent the longest time placing other people's access above their own need for interior space. The guilt is not evidence that the impulse is wrong. The guilt is evidence of how long you have been trained to treat your own needs as the last item requiring attention. What the urge to disappear is reacting to, specifically, is not the people in your life. It is the distance that has opened between who you actually are and who you have been presenting across the accumulated weight of daily interaction. Every moment that required you to suppress something real adds to that distance. The urge arrives when the gap between your inner experience and your outer presentation becomes something your nervous system can no longer quietly absorb. It surfaces not as a choice, but as a pressure, the self asserting that it has reached a limit you were too busy accommodating others to notice approaching. Some people feel it after years of caregiving. Some feel it after long periods of professional performance, of being required to embody competence and composure at the cost of everything more complicated. Some feel it after relationships where love was expressed exclusively through giving, until the self had nothing left to offer back to itself. The specific trigger varies. The underlying architecture is the same, a self that has been living at the outer edge of its own territory for too long, signaling as clearly as it can that the distance has become unsustainable. Understanding this shifts the relationship to the feeling. It does not make the guilt disappear, but it changes what the guilt is pointing at. It is no longer about being someone who fails at connection. It becomes about a harder and more honest question: what kind of genuine connection has been possible when one person in every room has never quite been fully present, because their presence was always being managed, adjusted, and offered before it was ever actually felt? The desire to disappear is not a rejection of people. It is a request from the deepest part of you to be allowed back into your own life, without performance, without the slow erosion of constant accommodation, without the quiet self-erasure that passes for generosity. If that truth reached something in you, this channel exists to go further into the interior territory most conversations are too afraid to enter. Subscribe if you want to keep going.